I hated Salvation Army among all the talented derelicts, drug addicts, and creepazoids. Sometimes I wondered whether the food helped to keep them that way, I guess except for the drug addict part. Now, I wasn't one of them, mind you. I'd go there after work, tired, hungry, and I just wanted to get in and eat and get out. I don't mean to talk down about volunteer organizations or derelicts or creepazoids or anything like that. Don't get me wrong, I'm just saying I wanted to just sit down and be left alone and then go home. While I was there, I did my best to ignore the people there. You know, they'd start arguments, they'd shout from one end of the room to the other, they'd go on and on about who's new on Megan's Law and the sex offender registration list, or that this is a church, you're not supposed to argue in a church, and end every sentence with the word yo. Years ago, for example, last year during Christmas week, one day someone yelled, "Well, thank you, you look like a pig." I was like, I'm cut. I can't hold on. Yo. So I tried to change the mood of the place. And I sang out a spin-off from the Little Drummer Boy song. I have no gift to bring, I just rub a bum's bum. Rub a bum's bum. Me and my bum. It worked because everybody got quiet, and when I was done, somebody said, "Amen, yo, you're right there, dude, you're right there, yo." One person laughed, a boy in a wheelchair, who always used to stare at me and would follow me outside when I'd leave, and then look sad when I drove off without paying any notice, really. Well, wait a minute. You know, I just said it was a boy, but one day I discovered it's a girl, or rather a small-sized young woman with a youthful look and hair chopped down to about an inch long. She looked like a boy until I saw that she was a girl. After that, she looked like a girl, a dirty girl, in a beat-up purple kid's-sized wheelchair with one lopsided wheel. I didn't like the way she had kept staring at me all the time, but she seemed harmless, so I didn't say anything about it to her. And she actually seemed to maintain a pleasant disposition overall, despite her condition, whatever that was. And she also quietly laughed over just about anything I'd say to anybody, which I didn't do very often. And when she'd laugh, she'd sort of bounce up and down a little in her wheelchair. Oh, at first, I didn't even realize that she was in a wheelchair. I would always sit at a round table near the door so I could get up and go without passing other people. And her apparently saved seat was on the other side of the table there from me. Her kid-sized wheelchair didn't even reach the top of the table, so I didn't even notice it until the first day she followed me outside when I left. Up until then, I thought she was really just short. That's also the day I realized she was a she. I saw that she has boobies. She wheeled down the ramp outside that day, which has two switchback turns on it, the ramp. She went too fast and banged into the handrail at the turns. Then she tried to get over to me at my pickup truck before I could get away. I got my door closed about a second before she got to me. She had this grin on her face and looked up through my window at me like that, and I got a good look inside her mouth. Bits of whatever we'd been eating in there stuck on her teeth. Whatever teeth she had, that is. Yellow scum stuck on them, too, so thick that it made her teeth all look connected to each other. And two of her front teeth bucked way out, and behind the yellow scum, all of them were dark-colored like they were half dead. One was even black and busted off. I wondered whether her boobies looked as awful as her teeth did under her oily-looking sweatshirt. Its sleeves hung too far down, but her fingers stuck out, and they were all dirty. And under her nails I saw black stuff, so the rest of her body probably looked horrid too, but I didn't want to find out, and as quickly as possible I just put my mind to starting my truck. But my truck was a piece of shit, which I called my POS for short, and it wouldn't start. The battery had drained again. I had to carry around a big battery charger thing that needed plugged in somewhere to work. So I always also carried around a couple of long extension cables. I kept them and the charger thing in the back, in the truck bed. I got back out to deal with hooking up to the outside wall outlet, which I parked near because of my POS. I tried to ignore the grinning abhorrence in the wheelchair, but she said in an anticipant way, "Hi," like she wanted to start a conversation with me, but only knew that one word. I'd have felt like a total jerk if I didn't say anything back to her. So I said hi too, but without looking at her. I just lifted out the battery charger thing and set it on the ground. I reached back into bed for the cables like I had nothing more to say, but she tried again. In a cheerful, childlike voice, she said, "Looks like you have a piece of shit." I asked her where, and I looked down at my boots. And she went on, "These GMC Sonomas are known for that. Do you need any help?" Now, how the hell was she going to help me? How was she going to be of any help? I mean, even if I needed it, she needed a lot more help than I did. And all I wanted to do was get my POS running and go home. The only reason I even ate at Salvation Army, which I called Starvation Army, by the way, was because I lived alone at the time and I didn't like to cook for myself or eat at home alone. And Starvation Army was free. I couldn't afford to eat out every day. I couldn't even afford to fix my POS anymore. I had already dumped more than enough into that contraption, and it got to nickeling and diming me to death. I hurried the best I could, unwinding cable and getting it plugged into the building, and I almost fell on my ass on some ice. One time, anyway, I almost slipped and fell. It was winter. Her presence irritated me, and I wanted to escape from it. But I couldn't just tell her to leave me alone. So, yeah, I almost busted my ass on the ice because of her. Then I had to cart the charger around her, and there were her crusty fingers again and her rotten mouth. It did surprise me, though, what she said about my POS. Even I hadn't known what she said about GMC Sonomas. I didn't want to get into a dialogue with her over it, though. Not my choice thing to do, you know what I mean? But again, I felt like I owed her a response. I didn't give much thought to what I'd say. "Well, yeah," I said to her, "I could use $20, a new truck, and a blowjob." I hoped that would drive her off. I'd never even said anything like that to a woman before, not like that. But I didn't care what she thought of me, really, and like I said, I felt irritated. And I just pretty much had blurted it out. And then I thought it sounded a little funny, me having the balls to do that out of the blue that way. But it didn't scare her off. Instead, she reached into her back pocket the best she could and pulled out a Harley-Davidson wallet attached to a chain. "I can help with 2 out of 3. Her voice now sounded angelic, and she produced a 20 and handed it up to me, still smiling and looking proud of herself. So now I was in a bind. I could have told her I was just kidding, but there she sat, sincerely trying to be of some kind of help and implying yes to the blowjob idea. And if I took the 20 but not the rest, it would kind of look like I had just used her for her money. And then she'd feel screwed over and then rejected. And I was the one who brought it all up in the first place. I wasn't sure what to do or say next. "Do you need a ride somewhere?" Well, maybe I could just return the gesture, and that way we'd be even up. She said, "Sure." And I got involved in helping her to stand up and getting her over to the side of my POS where she could hang on and trying to fold up her awful-looking wheelchair and loading it into the back. Of course, then I had to help her around to the other side, trying not to get against her much, and then get her up in the seat and finding the seat belt and fiddling with it around her waist and get it connected, all of which she accepted like it was all she ever knew about her life. And I felt bad for her and disgusted by her and confused about the situation. I got the motor started, and I disconnected the battery charger and got it and the cables into the truck bed again. Then I climbed into the driver's seat, closed my door, and turned on the heater, and we drove out of the parking lot. We didn't say anything at first. In a minute, though, I thanked her for the 20. And now then there was the matter of this blowjob to worry about. that rotten mouth and her crud and this whole Starvation Army crippled woman wheelchair thing, and me having thought she was a boy in the first place, and now not wanting to hurt her feelings, I don't know. So there we were driving toward where she now told me to go, which wasn't far away, and I got to thinking about all this. Damn, I haven't had a blowjob in a long time. I don't want to get involved in this, but here she is with her boobies, offering me 2 out of 3. What have I got myself into this time? My God, this isn't good. Not good at all. But hey, I could just take her to my place, get it over with, and then take her where she wants to go, and never go back to Starvation Army again, and be done with it. Are you serious about the 2 out of the 3? You know, see, giving her a ride hadn't been part of the original idea, right? Nor had I offered it as a substitute for anything in the original idea. So yeah, I asked her if she was serious. Sure. Good God, this time she sounded really cheerful, like this was something exciting in her otherwise dull and incapacitated existence. So now I felt committed to finding a way to pull through a close shave with tragedy, making sexual contact with probable gum disease, while trying to not pay much attention to any of it, so that I might soon not even remember any of it. We got to my place, which really wasn't my place. It was temporary because my real place had just burned down, and this was an old mobile home someone let me stay in, and it was a real dump. We got the dirty deed done in there, and then I took her where she wanted to go. I don't even want to go into any of that further than this right now. Now, after that, I stayed away from Starvation Army. I couldn't stand to think about going there now. But she started popping up just about everywhere I went in town. Weird, you know? I mean, I'd never even seen her before except at Starvation Army at the table. Now she's everywhere. If I went to Walmart, there she'd be in her wheelchair stuffing merchandise into her pockets and following me around in the store. If I pulled into a gas station, there she'd be wheeling down the sidewalk, and then she'd see me and come flying over to say hi, always with a big smile and her awful teeth showing. There wasn't any way to get away from her in town, and the memory of 2 out of 3 never got a chance to go away either. I got the feeling pursued and haunted by her and by what we'd done. It was going to be the last time I ever said anything to anybody about a blowjob, I tell you that. Not out of the blue the way I did, I can assure you. I never had done it before, like I said, and I'd never do it again. I couldn't go anywhere without her being there. I could park my POS someplace in town and go inside and come back out, and there she'd be sitting there in her beat-to-hell little purple wheelchair waiting for me out there so she could say hi. And then she'd look at me like she wanted something. One time I tried to give her back the 20, but she refused it. She said I should keep it and use it to fix up my POS GMC. I didn't want any more reminders of my contraption. I had enough of those every time I needed to start it. But she continued, saying she knew all about them having trouble like mine did, because her father, who she said died when she was 9, used to be a general technician for General Motors in Cincinnati, and he used to say that she was his little angel, even though she was all crippled up with one of her legs just dragging around behind her because it didn't connect inside at the top. And she wanted to be like him, so she tried to learn all she could about cars and stuff. Another time she asked me whether if she needed a ride the next day, would I give her one? Once again, I felt like I'd be an asshole if I said no, so I said sure. So I had to give her my phone number for in case she needed to call me for the ride the next day. I did not want to give my phone number to her, no, but I did it anyway. And she called me for the ride the next day, and I gave it to her. But now she started showing up even more frequently wherever I went in town. Much worse than that, though. She got into the habit of texting me all the time on my cell phone. I had to keep my phone turned up at work so my boss could contact me I was an industrial painter, so often I worked up high on a ladder and often also in close proximity to site general contractors and other tradesmen. She'd text me, but I wouldn't know if it was her or my boss until I looked at the phone. Looking at my phone while up on a ladder, often with gloves on and a brush or some other tool in one hand and trying to hold onto the ladder with the other hand, checking to see if it's my boss trying to contact me. This is risky business. And if it wasn't him, it was more than just an annoying distraction. In addition to the risks of falling off, or dropping something on someone's head, or of making a mess of paint on the floor, and of getting distracted and wasting my time, people could easily get the idea that I also wasted company time with personal communication on my cell phone. And there she was now, texting me more and more frequently with drivel like, "Hi," or "How are you?" or "How was lunch, dear?" Now, first of all, I kept text. Not every time, but sometimes I would text her back right away saying, "Stop texting me." And that, for a slew of reasons, it was a bad thing to do. To which she would just text me again and say, "Okay." But then she wouldn't stop doing it anyway. Second, for God's sakes, she was calling me dear now, a nickname in which I had no interest. I told her to stop doing that too, but she kept on doing it too, along with texting me. Every chance she thought she could work in the word dear, she worked in the word dear. Then at night, when I would be just about asleep, in would come another text from her, or a phone call from her. Usually, I had to get up before dawn to get to work, and I wasn't in any kind of mood for trite contact, especially on the phone, not from anybody, let alone from her. Finally, I informed her that I was keeping all of her text messages and that I was going to make a report about her stalking me if she kept it all up. She said, okay, she'd stop everything, but then she just kept on doing everything. In fact, she did it even more. At night, she'd text me, "Good night, dear." In the morning before I even got up, she'd text me, "Good morning, dear." And then an hour or so later, "Are you on your way to work, dear?" And then as I would get off work and I'd be cleaning up our company's shop area, as they called it, there at the job site, she'd text me, "Are you coming to Salvi to eat, dear?" Or "How was work, dear?" And if she would call me, which she also got to doing a lot, she would just say hi and then nothing, waiting for me to say something, but I had nothing to say. She was the one who had called me, I guess just to say hi and then go quiet. I wouldn't know whether she was even still on the line some of the time, so I'd say hi again. After maybe a third time of me saying hi again, she might say something like, "Hi," again. I'd ask her what she wanted, and then she wouldn't say anything. So I'd tell her not to call me anymore. But then an hour or so later, she'd call me again or text me again. And this again and again stuff went on ad nauseum, ad infinitum, and ad absurdum. I couldn't get her to stop it, or to stop showing up everywhere and then following me around in her nasty wheelchair with her crud and her rotten mouth and her smile like she was my dog or something. People were getting the idea that she and I were an item. Well, that idea made me sick. I wasn't interested in a relationship with a woman right then, not even a decent-looking one, or just a decent one for that matter, even if she didn't look so good. But this carnival sideshow stalker freak, no way. No way in hell. One evening I drove through town along a one-lane side street, hoping not to run into her. But sure enough, there she came, wheeling the wrong direction in the middle of the street. I had to stop so I wouldn't run her over. She just sat there looking like this was a normal thing to do. This was it. This was the last straw for me. This had to stop, and it had to stop right now. But I acted nice to her, and I asked her if she needs a ride anywhere. She said, "Sure," in her usual cheerful way. So I got her in her dumb wheelchair in, and I drove her out of town. I didn't say anything, and neither did she. I suppose she figured we were just out for a romantic moonlight drive. We got out in the country somewhere, where it was pretty dark, and I stopped and unloaded her. I threw her wheelchair out, and I drove off. Then I got scared she'd find her way back to town somehow and keep on doing all the same stuff. So I went back and got her again, and her wheelchair again. I put them both in. I put her in, and I put the wheelchair in. I drove even further out into the country until we were out in the woods. I stopped again, and I got her out, and I got out her wheelchair. "Let's take a walk," I told her, trying to make her feel bad about not being able to walk. I felt bad for saying that almost instantly. And that annoyed me at her for even being there to say it to and then feel bad about saying it. This all had to end. I pushed her way back out into the sticks, over enough rough terrain so that she couldn't possibly make it back to town on her own. Then I dumped her on the ground and I told her, "Goodbye, dear." And I walked back to my POS, which I had left running, because it wasn't going to start on its own if I turned it off. Then I got scared that she'd find her way back to town, even from way out there in the sticks, before she starved to death or some wild animal ate her alive. So I walked back to her again. There she was, laying where I dumped her. I shined my little pocket flashlight on her. The sight of her laying there like that made me feel disgusted at her, more than ever. I walked back to my POS once more. I got out my Bowie knife from the floor by my seat, and I got my hatchet from under the seat, and I returned it to her with them. And then I chopped her up into pieces, with her head off, and her arms off, and her legs off. I used the back of my hatchet's head to beat apart her wheelchair into pieces, about as many pieces as I chopped her body into. Excuse me. And I returned to my POS again. But then I got scared that somebody would find the carnage and the wreckage laying out there and not know what it was all about. Besides, I guessed that maybe I should do a little something in recognition of her pathetic life that she'd lived. So I got out a piece of cardboard I had in the back and a magic marker out of my glove box, and I walked back to where she was. Again, I set her body parts with the wheelchair parts so that they matched up like one for one. I stuck one of her arms into the spokes of one wheel and the other arm into the spokes of the other wheel, and I put her head on the seat and so on like that, Oh, did I tell you that she was a drunk? No, I don't think I mentioned that yet. Yeah, it turned out that was why she'd run into the handrails at the Starvation Army. She always had a bottle of Johnny Walker tucked in beside her on her wheelchair. Johnny Walker, of all brands. Walker. Ironic. I made a sign with the cardboard and the magic marker, and I stuck it in her mouth so that her rotten teeth didn't show. Too disgusting. Well, it wasn't so much of a sign as it was an epitaph. I felt wholly inspired in writing her epitaph, the final note on her miserable life. Here lie the parts of a stalker, drenched with too much Johnny Walker. She stalked me much to my despair, so I killed her and her chair.